So welcome to the Natural Area Association's 2022 webinar series. We're delighted to be offering you great scientific content. I'm Maura McGinty-Kloss. I'm the Programs and Communications Manager, and I'm delighted that you're joining us today. The purpose of an NAA webinar is not just to convey information, but to engage natural areas professionals on topics of interest that highlight emerging science, methodologies, and best practice. The Natural Areas Association serves those dedicated to the management and restoration of ecologically significant landscapes in North America. Protecting nature requires reliable science to inform practices on the ground and a network of stewards who work tirelessly to protect, manage, and restore land and water biodiversity. We are a community of peers and colleagues who become a resource to each other, and we respond to questions, propose ideas, and share methodologies so that we can all advance best practices. If you're a member of the NAA, you will have on-demand access to this and all of our webinars through the member portal. If you paid to participate in this webinar because you're not a member, please know that you will have 7 days to access the recorded archive. We'll send you an email afterwards, and a link to the recording will be available, as well as any resources that get posted. And then sometimes the chat becomes a resource in and of itself, so we post that as well. If you would like to become a member after you review your archive or during that 7-day period, we will apply the $29 that you paid for the webinar to your membership. And so a membership would just be $50, and you get to access all of our archived webinars at no cost. So 3 webinars in a year, and it's paid for itself. I just want to remind everyone that the Natural Areas Conference is coming up September 6th through 9 in Duluth, Minnesota. Our call for proposals is open, and we want to hear from you. We're getting down to the last 2 weeks, so the deadline is March 1st, 2022. We're looking for individual session talks, hands-on workshops, half day, and posters and all kinds of things. So please check out our website, www.naturalareas.org. and submit your proposal. We've kept it short on purpose so that it won't take you a long time. I'm also really excited to share with you that the NAA has offered our very first virtual field workshop, Stewardship in Action Field Workshop. We offered it in January. It was a combination of a live presentation where we were all together in September, our first in-person event since COVID. We videoed the field workshop, and then we put it together and engaged all of our presenters who joined us on January 25th. It was an excellent session that focused on managing public access for the protection of rare plant communities, and it is now available in a recorded format for purchase if you missed it or wanted to see it or would like to check it out. And now I just want to share with you some of our upcoming webinars. So Esri has sponsored a webinar for geographic approach for natural areas management that is open to everyone. So we want to thank Esri for underwriting that webinar. Hope for the Hemlocks, HWA management approaches on public and private lands in North Carolina is coming up in May, and we'll hope you join us for that. And then in June, fire ecology in the upper Midwest, effects of fire seasonality and intensity on controlling and respouting wooding plants. And now let's get to today's topic. What's that smell? How detection dogs can lend a paw in conservation programs. So our speaker today is Laura Holder, Executive Director and Canine Keeper of the Ernie and Betty White Conservation Dogs Collective. Laura's lifelong fascination with canines, especially their unique ability to work alongside humans, inspires her every day in the field. She loves training and deploying the CDCI Finder Keeper teams to support clients in their critical conservation efforts, driven by her boundless curiosity about how dogs think, learn, and detect scent. Laura has been nose deep in the professional fields of scent detection, nose work, and dog training since 2009. And I think we hit every potential pun and play on dogs there, Laura. So thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to you so you can take over the screen.
Thank you so much, Maura. As I'm flipping over here to my screen, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you are here with us today and interested in the topic of conservation dogs. as Maura said, I encourage you guys to ask any questions that you have while we're live, or afterwards. Feel free to reach out to us. There are so many questions about this method as it's relatively new. So yeah, I'm really excited, and you're going to see a lot of our really cute finders throughout the presentation as well. And we're going to get started right away with what's that smell? How detection dogs can lend a paw in conservation programs. There's one of the puns. So you got my bio already from Maura. These are just a couple of cute shots of my current canine co-woofers. On the left, you've got Ernie, the yellow lab, and on the right, Betty White. Ernie is about 5 years old, and Betty is just 2 years old. And here's a look at our entire crew of, we call them our superhero sniffers. The canine finders are truly at the core of the work that we're doing. In total, our team comprises of 8 finders spanning 3 different states. We're currently in the upper Midwest area, and the dogs range anywhere from 1 year old to 8 years old. And we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty about what they do in a little while here. But we're first going to get started with a little trivia to get the audience engaged. So we're going to have a poll going on. Maura's going to help coordinate that for us. So first question, if you're so inclined to participate, think about this question. Approximately how many scent receptors do dogs have? So we have more than 14 billion, more than 200 million, exactly 150,000, or less than 450. Okay, and the results are in here. 75-ish% people got it correct. More than 200 million is the correct answer. So depending on the breed of dog will depend on how many scent receptors are present in their olfactory cavity. As you might suspect, dogs with longer noses like bloodhounds, German shepherds, Labrador retrievers have more surface area, so they have more scent receptors. So well done, everybody. Okay, so let's get right into what a conservation dog is. So first and foremost, they are working dogs. While there's not any industry-wide certifications yet for this industry, there are many, many organizations working on getting some standardizations going on for this growing field that we have. Conservation dogs are trained to detect anything of interest and value for conservation efforts. And the puns are going to come all over the place, guys. Sorry, it's just part of who I am. I like to say they like to protect the planet with each sniff that they take. They got their start back in 1890s in New Zealand. So that was the first documented use of conservation dogs. The dogs there have been used to sniff out primarily birds, as you might suspect, on the island, to be monitored and or moved to help with preservation of species. And they're also being used in New Zealand during that time to make sure that pests are not infiltrating. So no rodents, ants, weeds, and so on and so forth. So they've been around for quite a while in a professional capacity. Most recently in the United States in particular, the dogs have been used for a couple of decades, and the primary use has been scat detection, which is really easy for dogs to implement and use their canine noses for. However, the expansion has gone, especially in the past 20 years or so, into animals, whether that's alive or dead animals, plants, evidence of animals through locating body parts. We're even getting into some bacteria and diseases, fungi, and contaminants. And we'll talk about those in more detail today. So ways that dogs can help with conservation efforts. There's many different facets in how they can help here. First is protection. So in this picture here, this is a bumblebee nest. It's a common eastern bumblebee nest. So our organization right now is one of the only in the United States that are using dogs to locate bumblebee nests. So in doing so, we're helping to allow for study of the species and also protection of habitats that they're found in. Data collection is another great use for conservation dogs. So detecting evidence of species or monitoring by locating the scats, carcasses, dens, roosts, and so on. restoration efforts, so detecting invasive species for removal or restoring habitats. There's my best friend Ernie again. He's sniffing out a wild parsnip rosette that those of you who know what that is immediately saw that. They're also being used to help with relocation efforts. So specifically when there are land developments going on or construction of bridges and housing units, dogs are being used to help with species identification, especially if it's a protected species. So on the same dog here on the left there, that's our friend, what's his name? I always forget Rocky's name. Yeah, Rocky, he's sniffing out the great crested newt over in the UK. Enforcement is another great use for dogs. Specifically in Africa, this is being used quite a bit, sniffing out wildlife trafficking and poachers through training the dogs to locate firearms, certain types of animals, and even different types of equipment such as traps and snares that are being used. Biosecurity, so identifying diseases and infections. We got our crew over on the left from the Department of Ag. And then on the right, we have our crew down in, that's in Georgia, the island of Georgia. They're doing port of entry detection with the dogs. Contaminants is another great use for conservation dogs. On the left, the gentleman in the middle, that's our friend Paul Bunker. So he's actively working in this case on an oil spill, and the dog's been trained to detect trace amounts of oil so they can do appropriate cleanup measures. And then on the right-hand side, the team from Environmental Canine Services, those dogs are trained to sniff out human waste so they can be used urbanly as well as suburbanly to find point of contamination. Okay. I like to keep everybody awake and active. It's part of my jam. So let's kick it again with another poll. So true or false, a dog's wet nose helps them scent better. 89% said true, 11% said false. The answer is definitely true. So the moisture on the dog's nose helps attract more scent molecules at the end of the day. So one of the things, fun fact in the field, if we're working in really dry conditions, we bring the dogs out and we immediately usually give them some water. So we'll either just ask them to drink water if they're just looking at us like, I want to get to work. We'll drop a treat or two in the water to really just dip their nose in there and get it nice and wet and ready for work. Okay, which leads naturally into why we should use dogs for conservation. I think the better question truly is, why shouldn't you use a dog? Anybody that is watching today or has shared their life with a dog, if not currently doing so, knows how incredibly nosy they are. They're just sniffing superstars. They can breathe on the inhale and exhale. They can independently get data from each nostril while they're working. And then they also obviously can traverse incredible terrain that we just cannot. The Olympics are going on right now. It's a great, there's another pun, they're Olympic athletes in the scent work world. They've got speed, they've got agility, they can cover immense areas in a fraction of the time that us two-leggeds can. And they're also portable. So literally, we know we can pack them in our car, drive them to where we need to go search. They can also be used on land and then also in water. You can put them on boats and their noses work just as well. Depending on the size of the dog too, they can work in small spaces with great efficiency. They have increased accuracy and efficiency, and there are so many studies out there that are showing this and more that are getting published every month. You guys will get the resource for this one. Last year, Anna Margaret Grimm-Seyfarth, I always botch her last name, Seyfarth, she put together a collection of over 2,000 different articles, and 14,000 of those were actual research papers. In her summary, 88% of those cases showed that detection dogs worked better than human-only survey methods. So that's incredible to have that research backing up what we've known for quite a while. In one particular study, it was a koala scat study. Dogs were found to be 153% more accurate than human-only surveys in locating scats. And time-wise, they were 19 times more efficient. Dogs are also less invasive and more economical than some other survey methods. Using dogs, we like to say their footprint when we're working out in the wilderness is much like humans. They're not going around destroying things with their activity or the physicality. Using dogs can also help minimize and avoid active manipulation of animals. And it's also lower stress a lot of times. Our dogs are, for CDCI, our dogs are trained to perform what we call a passive alert. So if they are locating live animals, they are not touching it, they're not barking at it, they're not picking it up or anything. They're trained to either just sit and wait for the human to come over and verify, or sometimes they are trained to go locate and do, we call it Timmy's in the well, refind. So they'll go find the turtle, for example, and they'll come right back to the human and say, hey, come on, come with me and go check this out. Their ability to locate cryptic and rare species is also, it's almost unknown right now, like what their capabilities really are in this regard, but there are many applications where the dogs are successfully being able to locate these hard to find species. And cost. One of the favorite facts I have about conservation dogs is that they can search for multiple targets simultaneously. So for example, Ernie is trained on over 8 different odors. If we're out in a habitat where we might encounter 2, 3, 4 of those odors, he's going to tell me about all of those species at the same time. And he doesn't ask for 4 times of the paycheck. And they also deliver instantaneous results. So a well-trained conservation dog is trained to such accuracy that you almost don't even need to verify the finds that they have in the field. They truly have a very unbiased, honest opinion about what they're trained and what they're going to get paid for. Okay, let's do another trivia. True or false? Any dog can be a conservation detection dog. Oh, this one results 33% said yes or true, and 67% said false. I wish I put in it depends. That's one of the options. Well, it's somewhat true. So, and why I put this question in here was there are many different applications for dogs to be used in conservation. There's the big programs where you may have seen in studies that dogs are sniffing whale scat off of boats in the Pacific Ocean, or they're traversing 200 acres a day trying to locate bumblebee nests or black-footed ferrets. There's also a subset of conservation dog use that's much more laboratory-esque based, where some dogs that might not have endurance or capabilities to be out in the field for 8 hours a day are actually very well suited for that type of work. So it was kind of a trick question on you guys. Okay, so let's get into CDCI's belief in what it takes to be a conservation dog. So this is for our organization here. First off, we consider the age of the dog. We get the question a lot, like, how old is too old for this type of work? And it really depends. You're going to hear me say that repeatedly throughout this presentation. But it's the truth. Some dogs can be out in the field for 8 years of a working career. So they can be working when they're 10, 11 years old. It truly just depends on their physical ability and also their desire once they get older to keep doing that type of work. We usually do not deploy a dog until they are at least a year or a year and a half of age. And we can get into some of the details about, like, do we use puppies? Do we train puppies and all that stuff later in the Q&A? The physical structure of the dog is extremely important, and especially when it comes down to what type of program the dog might be working on. So with the port of entry example that I had earlier, dogs that are working on container ships or in really tight, rugged terrain, we might want to have a smaller dog. And by smaller, I mean like 20-pounder, a potential 20-pound-ish dog would be really well suited for that. Some of the larger landscapes that we work on, 35 to 55, 60 or so pound dog is really appropriate. And some of that in specific is driven by, like, if the dog gets injured and we have to carry them out of the field. Even though I think I'm pretty strong, if I had a 100-pound dog that I had to carry out of a 3-mile hike in, that's not going to be very fun on me or the dog. We have our fitness and stamina. So all of our canine finders do go through a individualized conditioning regimen throughout the year to really make sure that they're well suited for the work that they're going to do. So this goes beyond just getting them out and hiking in wooded areas or open prairie land. It's specifically targeted towards large muscle and small muscle development. They're also treated very well. They get acupuncture and canine massage and swim therapy and everything to truly make sure that they are those Olympic athletes that they need to be to do this job well. The temperament and personality also comes into consideration. I have many years of behavior work behind my belt. So this is where I really get nerdy with, what is the dog's actual temperament? Do they have the motivation to want to work alongside their keepers? Would they rather just, be an independent dog and so on? We really look for a team dynamic that highlights that the canine human bond at the end of the day. We get this question a lot too, like what breeds? As you saw on the intro slide, we have a very heavy Labrador Retriever crew right now. That's not by coincidence. Labradors, if anybody's ever been around them, they're quite popular. They're great hunting dogs. They also have an immense ability to be trained and want to be trained. It's really easy to work alongside them. But we also have, this is Harriet, named after Harry Potter. She's our resident pit bull. She loves to work. And what I love about Harry in particular is she loves to tug as part of her reward sequence. So in addition to the individuality and uniqueness of each of our finders is also their keeper's ability to really identify what they're motivated to get paid with at the end of the day. And also the nuance of really understanding and mastering that individual dog, what they're going to be suited for particular fieldwork projects. And not every dog is appropriate for every single project either. Okay, I've got another poll here. How many different scents can a conservation dog be trained to detect? Okay, results. We had, I love that nobody said one. Well done. 15% between 2 and 7, 51% between 8 and 15, and then 34% more than 15. The answer is more than 15. So this has not been rigorously studied yet. There was a study that came out in January of this year about training dogs with novel targets. It wasn't specific to conservation, but it was novel targets and odors. And some of those dogs were fluent in detecting over 40 different odors. So we don't know yet. What I want to add to this particular question is we're always mindful about which targets and species we are training a dog on. Some of them are going to complement each other much better than others. And some dogs have a different capacity and capability to detect different thresholds of odor concentration. I'm getting a little nerdy here, but different odor concentration, but also they have tendencies for how they want to search as well. Some dogs that we have are very detail orientated in the way they search, whether it's inside or outside, and others are much better at working larger spaces with just bigger sweeps of how they're working those odor problems. From a reinforcement standpoint, there is studies going on all over in the behavior world right now and detection world about the more odors a dog can be on when they're out doing field work, the more motivated they're going to stay while they're doing their surveys. So a lot of times we get called in for endangered species, threatened species, which are somewhat like finding a needle in a haystack. Think about a dog's reinforcement ratio. If they're not getting rewarded for a 4 or 5 hour stint of working, like their performance is naturally going to go down. And that's not saying anything about the training of that dog at all or their desire to work. It comes down to literally like, I'm not getting a paycheck. We're not running into anything. So we always encourage people when we're doing program development to think about what other targets might be complementary or useful to learn about the species and the habitat that they're found in. some example projects. So I selected 3 different projects that CDCI has worked on or is currently working on to share with you guys to give you some practical applications here. So the first one is our Bumblebee Nest program. So in 2019, CDCI started a pollinator program, internally driven to really get out there and use our dogs for these critical pollinators. We quickly focused on bumblebees in particular, due to there's just a lack of knowledge about their habitat preferences and where they actually build their nests and their colonies. So if you don't know anything about bumblebees, I have a whole separate presentation just on this project that's about a half-hour long, so you can reach out to me if you're interested in learning more. But in general, these critical pollinators are really important for especially our agriculture and our food supply chain. Almost every single species of bumblebee in the world is seeing some kind of population decline. And while it is really easy to see them when they're out, bumbling around and foraging on flowers and everything, it's really, really hard to locate where they're actually building their nests. We are currently working in the state of Wisconsin and also in development for a couple other different states that we're going to deploy our dogs in to really understand the habitat preferences. So overlaying data of human-only observations of bumblebees foraging compared to where dogs are actually locating their nests is something that the researchers are really interested in at this point, so they can make informed decisions about resource allocation. And we're heavily using some citizen science apps and groups to really help us get this program up and running as best as we can. This past year in 2021, our dogs were out in the field and they did find 4 nests, which was really great. We had a pretty closed survey season, so we didn't have a huge set of data to pull from, but the positive outcomes of the dogs being able to go from a training scenario of like, I'm putting out the nests, or I have a partner, put out the nests for the dogs to find, to actually them translating that to finding in situ wild nests was something that was really positive. At this time as well in the program, we are interested in the dogs finding any species of bumblebee, because there's just so much unknown. It's not that we're only going for like the rusty patch bumblebee, even though that's our ultimate goal, like to find one of their nests out in the wild. But we're constantly evolving and really trying to optimize when the best use of the finder keeper teams is going to be. Last year we went out pretty late in the season, so vegetation was very high and very, very dense. And this upcoming season, we're going to try to go out earlier in the season, more time, multiple times. So starting in mid-June or so, we're going to get the finder keeper teams out there doing their thing. And just because there's Ernie looking very happy, that is I believe that's a red-belted bumblebee potentially. I can't remember if it's a red or a brown-belted. That was one of the nests that he found during a training exercise when we were going into an area where we knew there were 3 other nests. As we were coming up into the area, he just took a beeline, literally, over and he showed us a brand new nest that nobody had found yet. Another program that we have worked on, myself with Ernie, and then also our finder keeper team, Joe and Willow down in Indiana. We've worked on 2 different species of turtles, wood turtles, and also the common, or not the common eastern, geez Louise, it's my problem, the eastern box turtle. And I know there are several folks in the group here that are interested in turtle work as well. So the problematic issues that face, trying to find where they are, the individuals, and also their nesting areas. Obviously the trade industry, pet industry is very high. And I mean, I found out wood turtles are literally being just picked up, people just take them home. I'm like, oh, what? Oh my God. And then roadway fatalities as well. So the population decline is a real thing with turtles, as everybody knows here. So the dogs are being, brought in to help, again, learn more about the habitats where turtles are found, where they're making their nests, to help with protection and restoration efforts. A lot of the program partners that we've worked with to date are using, telemetry equipment, and they have some turtles that have trackers on them, but it can be unreliable, as you guys know. So we're being used as a complementary monitoring method to the current methods out there. The doggies have found this has been one of the challenging programs as well. We have found that turtles don't have a ton of odor that fly off of them for the dogs to be trained on. So a lot of the in situ training has been way more valuable to the dogs than getting scented swabs or even using live animals during training. We try to avoid that as much as possible just to reduce stress on the animals. But this in particular, this program is somewhat on a pause right now for both species as we're building more partnerships and really evaluating, do we want the dogs to be finding the individuals, or do we want to shift our efforts over to teaching them how to locate nesting sites by, getting nesting material and so on, or maybe both. So a lot of this is still in development, like many of our programs. And then the third project example, bird and bat carcass detection on wind farms. And we're lucky to be located right in the middle of the United States with most of our finder keeper teams, which directly overlaps with where a lot of the wind farms are. The use of detection dogs on wind farms is somewhat well known around the world as well as in the US. And I don't see this ever going anywhere in the next 20 years. If not, it might get even more used. Because the fact of the matter is these dogs can work the 50 to 200 meter plots, depending on where they are, with such relative ease. Like in 20, 30 minutes of time, they can be locating bats. In that picture on the left there, you're going to see that that's a bat carcass. Like imagine just walking and looking down, like we would never find that. It looks exactly like the vegetation or the mud that's right around it. And the human only surveys, they've heavily studied this on wind farms. They're very low accuracy. It's pretty bad compared to the dogs. The dogs are approximately 80% accurate compared to humans being only 20% accurate. This is a really great way to use finder keeper teams. The dogs get worked for 20, 30 minutes. They go on rest while humans or the keepers put in the data, and then you drive to the next turbine, repeat. So it's a really nice application. Okay. Now, I'm not going to lie, while I love dogs and I want to do all of the things with dogs for conservation detection, sometimes they are not the best choice. And I put this in there because it's a funny photo, but also it's the reality. Sometimes we don't know up front if the dogs are going to be a great choice or not. So we do just try out pilot studies with people. But as you're thinking about using dogs, if you have ideas in your head right now, some considerations that might sway you away from that. If you have to study or alter your study design to use the dog, probably not the best choice. Some environments are just not appropriate for dogs to be working in, some weather conditions as well. So if it's just think about like extreme weather conditions of heat or cold or extremely rugged terrain or like cliff sides, stuff like that. Like a lot of us from the dog side of the world are going to be like, they might be able to do it for a little while, but it's probably not the best choice. It's not a good use of resources or funding. I saw one of the questions in the chat box too, talking about my next point here, when wildlife is going to be put at risk. So it is our organization's mantra to first do no harm. Like we are not out there. We do not want our dogs putting wildlife at risk, stressing out animals or anything. So really assessing whether or not a dog is going to be appropriate for that species to encounter is something to consider. And then also on the flip side, the safety of our dogs with the particular species. So we've gotten several requests to train the dogs on various venomous or poisonous species, and we have politely declined. There are ways to do it, but it's going to take usually an actual specific dog trained on that particular target, because we want to be very clear in their training. Like this is what we would call fringe alert, like do not get X distance from that species. I want you to stay at like 5 feet away. And sometimes that actually isn't helpful at all for research. So how to set up for success when you're considering using a finder keeper team. study design with clear and realistic goals. And this is something that we are more than happy to work with you on. We come at it from the experience and expertise of working with the dogs and the programs that we've worked on in the past. So we truly want to get realistic goals shared upfront. Identifying the proper finder keeper team for that particular project as well. That's my job, to really analyze and assess which is going to be best suited for our team, but also obviously your project. Big part of our struggles is usually getting training samples. So as you might imagine, with endangered species, threatened species, a lot of times why we're using dogs or getting requested to use dogs is because they're hard to find in the first place. So really talking about how we're going to get training materials and setting up appropriate quantities of training materials and also variety. So that could be like different sexes of animals, it could be different ages, it could be different life cycles of the plant, and also different literal like locations, like where the snails, invasive snails pulled from this stream. Okay, I want another stream and a third stream to give the dog as much opportunity to learn the different variables that they might be presented with in the field. Ample time to conduct quality training for the teams. It seems like Captain Obvious saying that, but a lot of times we'll get calls, you know, like this time of year, like, hey, can you be ready in June? And it's like, no, probably not. So really giving the benefit of the doubt, like this does take some time depending on the species to train that finder keeper team and get them field ready. Testing in field conditions whenever, ever possible. We prefer to have that built into our training time. Getting out with in situ situations, and sometimes that requires us to drive several hours, and that's okay with us. We really find value in the teams having that ability to test under those conditions before field deployment. Thinking about data collection, you know, what outcomes are you hoping for and which metrics are you going to use to get there? And obviously the flexibility to adjust. So we are working with dogs. They are not robots. Sometimes they're going to swing us certain ways when we're doing training and tell us about things that we had no idea about. So just having that collaborative mindset of, you know, you guys are the experts in the projects that you're working on. We're the experts in working with the finder keeper team side of things. So really working and understanding and respecting each other's expertise and also being flexible.
Okay, so we've got some questions coming up, and before I get into that, I just want to say that Laura is and her colleagues are looking to be a part of the Natural Areas Conference in Duluth. So it's another reason to consider registering and coming to see, because you may even have the opportunity to see a live demo. All that is under consideration now because we're in the formative stages. So don't forget to put that on your calendar. All right. Now, after that shameless plug, let's go to questions and answers. The first question is, there are several questions that are kind of around breeds. So, you know, are there certain types of breeds that are working breeds, like the shepherd dog? Somebody mentioned Brittany Spaniels being used for turtles and bumblebee finders. Somebody else noted that there's a group in Southern California that's using Chihuahuas to detect small rodents. Mm-hmm. So, you know, can you just comment a little more on breed?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a bunch of different breeds being used for different projects around the United States and the world. Right now, I'll kind of speak at it from our organization first and foremost, and then zoom myself out. So our current workload and project demand is has a lot of variety in it. So we currently have dogs that can kind of shift around and hit multiple projects, you know, with the same nose, so to speak. So we like dogs that are medium-sized-ish. Betty White, who's on the screen right there, she's about 44 pounds. She's our smallest of weight. And then our biggest dog is about 65 to 70 pounds. But Labrador retrievers, the ones that are part of our crew, they're very nose-driven dogs. Some are air-scenting doggies by genetics. Other ones are more ground scenting in that particular breed. So it's interesting, like we have, I think, 5 Labradors, but all of them are very different in the way that they search. Spaniels, for sure. I'm actually hoping to get a spaniel someday. So Brittany Spaniels, oh gosh, what's the other one? Oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart. I'm sorry, guys. Over in the UK, they're using a ton of spaniels for the newt work, scat work, and all that. They're smaller, portable. They've got a really great motivation, like innate motivation to do sniff tasks, and they also have a great bond with their humans too. There's some German short hair pointers out there doing work, Vizslas. Oh, we've got I'm trying to think of the Australian cattle dogs are doing a lot of work. So Rogue Detection out of Washington State, their crew is like, we're a bunch of Labrador people. We always talk to them too. And they're like, we're over here with our Australian cattle dogs. Let's see. There's some Malinois with working dogs for conservation. So yeah, I mean, there's several different breeds. There's the smaller terriers are doing a lot of work on islands, like Hawaii and New Zealand. They're using smaller dogs for those particular projects. So a dog with a higher prey drive is really good for rodent type of work.
Okay.
But when we're doing stuff for like endangered birds and stuff, we don't want a dog that has a desire to actually go get the birds, right? So that's kind of a wonky, long answer, but.
So breed could have an impact on some of the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, certain breeds are selectively bred for certain tasks. So having that mindset of, let's align the dog with the particular project and species that we're working on.
Okay. Well, we've got lots of questions coming in, so let's keep moving along.
Yep.
How many different tasks can one dog be trained to do, and how long does it take to train a dog for a particular species?
Different tasks. I wonder what he means by tasks. I'm assuming projects, maybe?
Probably projects, yeah.
So I'll start with how long it takes to train a dog. So this is where I'll interject. Some of our keepers, including myself, really enjoy the process of raising a puppy into this type of work. So in that particular example, I spend the first year of that puppy's life just developing confidence in new environments, search skills where they just get to find food or their toy, to build problem-solving capabilities, and let them actually go through that natural process of, being a puppy and turning into an adult dog. Socialization is huge with me too, if I'm going to be raising a puppy. So that first year is just dedicated to those core foundation skills. When it comes to a dog being trained to detect an actual species, it depends, but in general, it can be about 6 weeks on the very short end to 6 months, if not longer, depending on the project. If the particular species has a lot of odor and is pretty easy-ish to find in the environment, like you can visually ID it with relative ease and set up those training scenarios, that's where you're going to be on the quicker end of the spectrum. We're working on an invasive snail project right now where we're really trying to nuance and hone in the dog's skills and detecting certain odor threshold ranges. That's going to tip over into more, several months of training time for that particular project. And how many different projects can one dog be trained on? I would kind of just default that back to like how many odors they can be put on to, in a way, 12 odors and so on and above.
Do they have different alerts or signals for different species? So when they're out in the field?
So that's something our team gets really nerdy about, our dog training team. They typically do not. We try not to train the dog like, okay, when you find a snail, I want you to sit. When you find a turtle, I want you to lie down. And some of that is mental bandwidth of the dog. So the scent work tasks are very demanding on a dog. So anything we can do to really just reduce any kind of extra requirements from them helps us honestly read them better in the field when they're doing their work. And also it's just being a more fair boss. So no, we don't. We do train them to perform what we call like a trained final response when they find whatever species it is. A lot of our dogs will either stand in place and just stare at the human. That's most of them actually, or they might lie down nearby. But still over time with mental and physical exhaustion, those are some of the behaviors that start to naturally decline, decrease on like day 2, day 3 of the job. So again, it's more of the training on the, I'm going on a soapbox, sorry guys. It's on the training of the
So
keeper side of things.
if you've got a very experienced dog who's trained on multiple odors,
Mhm.
how do you indicate to the dog, we're looking for this today, but we're not going to chase after this?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Some of us dabble in what's called match to sample training. So we might bring out like our training aid and say, hey, this is, the turtle smell. That's what we're going to go find today. Others of us don't bother with that, which is where I sit in the camp. If my dog, so for example, with the wood turtle project, we were not finding any wood turtles. And then all of a sudden we came across this giant field of wild parsnip rosettes. Ernie took a right-hand turn and went over in that field, and he just looked like a kid in Disneyland. He was like, oh my God, yeah, woo. I actually rewarded him for that. I was like, good job, buddy, we found that. Awesome. Now let's keep going for turtles. So again, it's that ratio of reinforcement and trying to keep that motivation high. I don't say like, only tell me about this today. Now, that said, like if he kept going back to the wild parsnip field or found another one or something, I might just leash him up and be like, okay, that's enough for now. Let's keep going. I'll encourage him to kind of stay on task for that particular project.
Okay.
Yep.
So the next question is kind of two questions. One person asking about invasive plants, using the dogs to find and potentially dig up smaller invasive plants, and sighting of rare plants or identifying rare plants. Are they ever used in those capacities?
Yes, dogs have been used in both capacities for sure. Our organization included. We've been on invasive plants and endangered plants. Plants are really tricky, as anybody on here who works with plants knows. Yeah.
Okay. Have dogs ever been used on for prescribed burn units to find the wildlife or anything like that?
I don't know if there's any articles out there about this, but that falls into the like kind of land management use for dogs. So if they want to come in with build a new development or something, dogs are certainly being used to kind of comb the landscape for threatened or protected species. The great crested newt over in the UK is one prime example of that. They're also doing some hedgehog work over in the UK for protecting that species. So I don't know if it's ever been directly tied to prescribed burns, but it's something that is definitely where dogs could be offering their services.
Is there a benefit to air scenting versus ground scenting?
Yeah, it depends on the species. So if you have a species that is going to be, found in the ground or even subterranean, you very likely want to be using a dog that has a natural knack for doing ground work. Species that might be found buzzing around or elevated in the environment, those air scenting dogs are usually more adapt to working on that type of species. But you can also train the dogs a little bit too, okay, there's also going to be stuff that's found up if they mostly like to work down low and vice versa. But we, again, try to align what's going to be the most efficient for that particular finder keeper team as it relates to the species they're working on.
So we also have a couple of questions that are more species specific. So one is the difference of training a dog for a broad class of animals, such as the bumblebees, or could you specifically train a dog for a rusty patch bumblebee?
Yeah, so those are discrimination tasks in the detection world. We could absolutely, and you can absolutely train a dog to detect one individual species in a larger genus. It's just that training time up front and also the sample acquisition that's the most challenging. So depending on the project, yes, we can absolutely put the time and effort in. If it's very, for the invasive snail program that we're working on right now, we want the dogs to tell us about the invasive snail, not the native snails that are found in the same waterways. So we're setting up more discrimination tasks for the dogs to really hone their noses in on that particular species. With the bumblebee work, however, we want the dogs to find all of the nests right now. And the abundance is just not there yet, where the dogs have gotten the fluency of oh, it's here and there and everywhere, because it's not. So, but as that program continues to evolve, there might be requests where we just want the dogs to find the rusty patch bumblebee nest or the western bumblebee nest.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
How about careers? There's some people who are interested in advice for someone who's interested in starting a career working with scent detection dogs, how you train people on training a dog, and what if you have a dog who has a natural inclination to help find stuff just in your own process, and you think that your dog would be a good candidate.
It's like 4 webinars
I know,
right there that I can
I
offer.
know.
Yeah.
Well, we got our last 5 or 6 minutes. You could just
No, I can
throw them in
answer
if
it.
you want.
I
Yeah.
can answer it top level for sure. I will say if you're brand new to scent detection as a experience that you want to get into, first and foremost, like try to find someone locally by you that's running either a canine nose work class, or if you have a professional detection unit that's, I mean, the police are really hard to work with for many, many reasons that are totally justified. But try to get hooked up with someone that can help mentor you and also just give you observation hours. I think it probably took me 4 years before I truly felt I understood how dogs worked odor in across a variety of different environments. And that was, God, I don't know, it was like 2010, I think, when I first started scent detection stuff. That was my dog prior to the 2 that I have now. He was kind of my learning dog. I did canine nose work classes with him. He was never a conservation dog candidate anyway, because of some behavioral challenges he had. But that was invaluable for me to go through the process of learning about scent theory, how to, reward him, where to reward him, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'd say for that. Like, get started by getting connected with someone in your community or online. There's a ton of online courses for competition-based nose work classes, and a lot of them are really, really good. If you have a dog that you think is a good candidate, I would say reach out to like myself or other conservation dog organizations and set up some mentorship time. I'm working with several people right now that are like, I either have a dog right now or I want to get a dog and do this type of work. And I'm putting them through some of the paces of like setting hides and what to look for. And we do video review and so on. So that's an option for them. And I'll make a note to offer a bigger webinar on that topic.
Somebody wanted to know if you happen to know of anyone who uses dogs to find horned lizards.
Yes, our friend Paul Bunker down in Texas. He's doing horned lizard detection.
Well, there you go. You got
business. I can send the business here. I'll put it in the chat box. Actually, Chiron K9 is Chiron K9 Paul Bunker. Oh.
Thanks, that's perfect. So this will probably be our last question, but just the notion, some things have come up along, just commenting a little more on dog temperament for dogs that might be good candidates, and the types of rewards. So you mentioned some might be food rewards, but for some dogs, it seems to be non-food related things.
Yeah, so for rewards, going on my nerd box a little bit here, we have a reinforcement spectrum that we work on for all the dogs. So some dogs are literally like, I don't care about toys at all. But that doesn't mean they're not a good detection dog. So it's really assessing and analyzing, like, what do you want to work for a ball? How about a piece of kibble? How about a slab of turkey? How about steak sandwich or something else? Like Betty White, when she was younger and developing some of her skills, she wanted to work for cardboard paper tubes as her reward, because she really just wanted to like pick them up and throw them around and like do play stuff with them. Sometimes as well, depending on the project, using a toy reward might not be the best solution. It could be, dangerous environments where the dogs we shouldn't be throwing, the ball into the vegetation nearby. So we like to have a variety, to be honest, and that includes like the interaction between the finder and the keeper. So it's not just like a food or a ball transaction. It's like that whole event and really getting the dog excited about payday.
Okay. I did just post several resources that Laura has provided. They will also be available with the archive when we post the recording. But one last question, and then we'll wrap up. Do you happen to have contacts for Northeast conservation dogs that work with rare orchid surveys?
I know people in the Northeast for sure. They're not working on rare orchids, but I'm sure they'd be delighted to talk with you. So feel free to shoot me an email and I'll connect you.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Well, we will be sending everyone who registered for this program will receive an email from the National Areas Association from me with the link to the recording as soon as it's ready. All resources that were either brought up in chat or provided by Laura herself. And we just want to thank you, Laura, for taking the time to be with us today. This was a really interesting topic, and it's just wonderful to see, that the dogs are so well treated and that they have such a great service to provide to all of us. It's really wonderful. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Maura. Thanks, everybody.